the summer of '78, Will Anderson lost all his cowhands just at the time he was to start his cattle drive.
Miserable.
The Cowboys didn't play by John Wayne's rules. It killed him on screen. It terrified child actors with real stampedes. And one villain, he got death threats for years. What started as a simple Western turned into a film where kids drove cattle through blizzards. Wayne broke his own code, and the final shootout rewrote what audiences thought they knew about heroes. These are 20 weird facts about the Cowboys. And buried deep in the chaos, a director who made the Duke cry and refused to apologize. Saddle up. This one rides hard. John Wayne had a rule: the Duke never dies. For nearly 4 decades, he'd survived shootouts, ambushes, war zones, and impossible odds. His characters could get wounded, beaten down, even broken, but they always walked away. It was part of the mythology, part of what made him untouchable on screen. So, when director Mark Rydell handed him the script for the Cowboys, Wayne read it once, then threw it across the room. His character, Will Anderson, gets shot in the back and dies in front of a group of terrified boys. No heroic last stand, no final victory, just brutal, sudden death. Wayne called Rydell and said, "I don't die in movies, find another ending." But Rydell didn't back down. He told Wayne the story only worked if the cost was real, if the kids had to finish what the man couldn't. And for the first time in his career, Wayne considered it. Not because he wanted to, but because deep down, he knew Rydell was right. After days of hesitation, Wayne finally agreed. But he had one condition: it had to matter. His death couldn't be cheap, couldn't be forgotten. It had to break something in the audience, and it did. Mark Rydell wasn't a Western director. He'd made dramas, intimate character studies, films about broken people trying to hold on. He didn't know cattle drives or gunfights or how to shoot Monument Valley at golden hour. And the studio knew it. Warner Brothers wanted someone with experience, someone who understood the genre, someone safe. But John Wayne saw something else. He'd watched Rydell's previous work and noticed the way he captured vulnerability, the way his characters cracked under pressure and revealed something human underneath. Wayne believed the Cowboys needed that. It wasn't just another shoot 'em up. It was about a man facing his mortality and a group of boys forced to become men before they were ready. So Wayne pushed for Rydell, hard. The studio resisted. They said Rydell would slow down production, wouldn't understand the scope, couldn't handle the outdoor shooting. Wayne didn't care. He told them if they wanted him, they had to take Rydell too. It was a gamble. Rydell had never directed anything this big, never managed this many moving parts. But Wayne trusted his instincts. And when Rydell showed up on set, he didn't pretend to know everything. He asked questions. He listened to the wranglers, studied the landscape, and learned fast. What he lacked in Western experience, he made up for in emotional honesty. And that's exactly what the film needed.
My name's Honeycutt. I'm 15. And everybody calls me Slim. I'm next. My name's Homer Williams, Mr. Anderson. And I hope I ain't wrote all the rough off of them. You all right, boy?
Yes, sir. My name's Clyde Potter. They call me Fats.
Lieutenant Jordan.
The boys weren't actors, at least not most of them. The casting call went out for real kids, ages 11 to 15, who could actually ride horses, rope cattle, and survive outdoor conditions. The studio wanted authenticity, not Hollywood polish, so they searched ranches, rodeos, and small towns across the Southwest. Some of the boys had never been on a film set. A few had never even seen a movie being made. They showed up in worn boots and dusty jeans, sun-baked and uncomfortable under studio lights. But they could ride, and that's what mattered. Robert Carradine, who played Slim, was one of the few with acting experience. The rest learned on the job, between takes, under pressure. Rydell didn't baby them. He treated them like the characters they were playing, young men thrown into something bigger than themselves. The shooting schedule was brutal. Long days in the saddle, early mornings, dust storms that forced delays. Some of the boys got saddle sores so bad they could barely walk. Others broke fingers, sprained wrists, took kicks from spooked horses. But they didn't quit. They couldn't, because Wayne was watching. And if the Duke didn't complain, neither would they. That toughness, that exhaustion, it's all over the film. You can see it in their faces, in the way they move. They weren't acting tired. They were tired, and it made every frame feel real.
What are you going to use for hands on this drive of yours, huh?
Bruce Dern knew what he was signing up for. The script called for his character, long hair, to shoot John Wayne in the back and kill him. It was the most dishonorable death imaginable for America's biggest cowboy. And Dern wanted the role badly, not because he hated Wayne, but because he understood the power of it. A villain so vile, so cowardly, that audiences would never forget him. But when word got out that Dern was going to kill John Wayne on screen, the backlash started immediately. Before the film even wrapped, Dern began receiving hate mail, angry letters, nasty calls, threats from people who couldn't separate fiction from reality. Some said they'd never watch another Bruce Dern movie. Others said worse. Dern's agent warned him it could damage his career, that playing the man who killed the Duke might typecast him forever as Hollywood's most hated heel. But Dern didn't care. He leaned into it. He made Longhair slimy, smug, irredeemable. And when the film hit theaters, audiences reacted exactly as expected. They booed, they cursed. Some even threw things at the screen. For years afterward, people would stop Dern on the street and tell him they'd never forgive him for what he did. And Dern would just smile, because that meant he'd done his job. The cattle drive wasn't faked. Most westerns at the time used small herds, controlled environments, tight shots that made a dozen cows look like 100. But Mark Rydell wanted the real thing. He wanted to capture the scale, the noise, the chaos of moving 1,000 head of cattle across open country. So the production brought in real ranch hands, real cow hands, and real cattle, over 1,200 of them. And then they had to actually drive them, just like in the script. For weeks, the cast and crew followed the herd through rough terrain, river crossings and narrow passes. It was slow, dangerous, unpredictable. Cattle don't follow cues. They spook, scatter, charge. During one river crossing, several animals panicked and nearly trampled a young actor. Crew members had to dive in and pull him out before he went under. In another scene, the herd broke formation and stampeded toward the camera truck. The operator kept rolling, even as the rig started rocking under the weight of the animals thundering past. Rydell refused to cut. He wanted that fear, that energy, and he got it. What you see on screen isn't movie magic. It's a real cattle drive, filmed with real risk, and it shows. The scope, the dust, the noise, none of it could be replicated on a soundstage. It had to be lived.
My name's Homer Williams, Mr. Anderson.
John Wayne never rehearsed, not usually. He showed up, knew his lines, hit his marks, and trusted his instincts. That was his method. But the Cowboys was different. For the first time in decades, Wayne asked for extra time to work through scenes, specifically the moments with the boys. He wanted to get the tone right, wanted to feel like a father figure, not just a tough cowboy barking orders. So he and Rydell would sit after shooting, going over dialogue, testing different approaches. Wayne was 70 years old and facing his own mortality. His health was declining. He'd already survived cancer once. And this role, a man teaching boys to be men before his time runs out, it hit close to home. There were days when Wayne couldn't hide the emotion. In one scene, where he delivers a speech about responsibility and manhood, his voice cracks. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't planned. Rydell saw it happen and kept the cameras rolling. Afterward, Wayne walked off set without a word. He didn't come back for an hour. When someone finally found him, he was sitting alone, staring at the horizon. He never explained what he was feeling. He didn't have to. The film said it for him. And that moment, that crack in the Duke's armor, it became one of the most powerful scenes in the movie. The blizzard scene almost shut down production. It was supposed to be mild snow, a light dusting to show the harshness of the trail. But Mother Nature had other plans. A real storm rolled in, dropping temperatures below freezing and dumping several inches of snow in under an hour. The crew scrambled to cover equipment. The boys huddled together for warmth. And Rydell faced a choice. Shut it down and wait it out, or shoot in the storm and capture something real. He chose to shoot. The cameras rolled as the boys struggled through the snow, herding cattle, fighting wind, their faces red and raw from the cold. None of it was staged. They were genuinely freezing, genuinely exhausted. One boy later said his hands were so numb he couldn't feel the reins. Another admitted he thought they were going to die out there. But Rydell kept them moving, kept the cameras running, and got footage that looked more like a documentary than a Western. When the studio saw the dailies, they were horrified. Child actors in a blizzard, lawsuits waiting to happen. But Rydell defended the decision. He said the discomfort was temporary, but the authenticity was permanent. And watching the film now, you can't argue. That scene doesn't just look cold, it feels cold. Because it was.
Just like you.
Roscoe Lee Browne almost turned down the role. He was a classically trained Shakespearean actor, a man of theater, poetry, and stage presence. And here was a script about cowboys, cattle, and dusty trails. It seemed beneath him. But then he read the character of Jebediah Nightlinger, the educated black cook traveling with the drive. Nightlinger quoted classic literature, challenged assumptions, and brought an intellectual weight to the frontier. Browne saw something rare. A black character in a Western who wasn't a sidekick or a stereotype, but a fully realized person with dignity and wit. Still, he hesitated. Westerns weren't his world. He didn't ride horses, he didn't camp, he didn't do stunts, but John Wayne personally called him and said, "I need you in this film." That changed everything. On set, Browne kept to himself, often sitting alone between takes, reading poetry. The crew thought he was aloof, but Wayne understood. He respected Browne's process, his seriousness. And when Browne finally delivered his scenes, the entire set went silent. He brought a gravitas that elevated every frame he was in. Years later, Browne called The Cowboys one of his favorite roles. Not because it was a Western, but because it proved a Western could be something more. A real mountain lion attacked the set. It wasn't part of the script. It wasn't trained. It was wild, wandering down from the hills during a night shoot. The crew was filming a campfire scene. The boys gathered around, lines of dialogue about fear and bravery. And then someone saw it, yellow eyes reflecting in the firelight. At first, they thought it was a coyote. Then it stepped closer. 150 pounds of pure predator, less than 30 yards from the cast. Everyone froze. Wayne slowly stood, keeping his eyes on the animal. Wranglers moved in with rifles, but Wayne raised his hand, signaling them to wait. For nearly a full minute, man and beast stared at each other. The boys didn't move. The cameras kept rolling, not out of bravery, but because no one knew what else to do. Finally, the lion turned and disappeared back into the darkness. When it was over, the crew exhaled. Someone joked that they should use the footage. Rydell said no, it would have been too unbelievable, but the boys never forgot it. And for the rest of the shoot every night, scene carried a little more tension, because they knew now. The wilderness wasn't just a backdrop. It was alive, and it was watching.
Them little bitty boys down there? Go on, you know better than that, Mr. Anderson. You know what you're gonna need to trundle them boys across the prairie, don't you?
John Williams didn't have time. He was already working on multiple projects, booked solid, in demand across Hollywood. When Mark Rydell approached him to score The Cowboys, Williams hesitated. The schedule was tight, the budget wasn't huge, and Westerns weren't his specialty. But Rydell showed him footage, raw cuts of the cattle drive, the boys facing down danger, Wayne's final scene. And Williams saw it, the emotion, the stakes, the weight of it all. He agreed, but only if he could do it his way. No traditional Western strings, no generic saloon piano. He wanted something bigger, something that honored both the classic Western and the story's deeper themes of loss and coming of age. The result was a score that felt epic and intimate at the same time. Sweeping orchestral movements mixed with quieter, more personal themes. When the studio first heard it, they weren't sure. It didn't sound like other Westerns. It sounded too big, too emotional, but audiences felt it. The music lifted the film, gave it a grandeur that matched Wayne's presence and a tenderness that matched the boys' journey. Williams later said, The Cowboys was one of his most underrated scores, and he was right. It's powerful, memorable, and decades later, still holds up as one of the great Western soundtracks. The horse fall nearly killed a boy. It was supposed to be a simple scene. One of the young actors riding through a narrow canyon, his horse navigating rocky terrain. They'd rehearsed it twice. The horse knew the path. Everything looked safe. Then, mid-take, the horse's hoof caught on a hidden root. The animal went down hard, and the boy went with it. He hit the ground at full speed. the horse rolling over his leg before scrambling back up. The crew rushed in. The boy wasn't moving. For a terrifying moment, everyone thought the worst. Medics arrived, checked for broken bones, spinal damage. Miraculously, nothing was broken, but the boy was bruised from hip to ankle, his leg swollen and purple. He was pulled from shooting for a week. Rydell visited him every day in the medical tent, apologizing, second-guessing the shot. But the boy didn't blame anyone. He wanted back in the saddle. When he returned, limping, still sore, Wayne was waiting for him. The Duke walked over, put a hand on the kid's shoulder, and said, "You're tougher than half the men I've worked with." The boy never forgot that. Years later, he said that moment, not the fall, defined his experience on the Cowboys. Because John Wayne didn't coddle him, he respected him, and that meant everything.
And the only way we're gonna get through is if you take orders. You'll get the best food in the territory, no rest, damn little sleep.
The final shootout was rewritten on location. In the original script, the boys ambushed Longhair and his gang in a straightforward gun battle. Clean, quick, heroic. But when the cast and crew arrived at the location, a ghost town in New Mexico, Mark Rydell wasn't satisfied. The scene felt too easy, too Hollywood. These were kids, not gunslingers. They shouldn't win because they're better shots. They should win because they're desperate, because they use their environment, because they fight dirty. So, Rydell gathered the stunt coordinators and the boys and started improvising. They turned the ghost town into a trap. Ropes strung across doorways, planks rigged to collapse, ambush points and shadows. The boys would use fear, surprise, and the villain's overconfidence against them. Bruce Dern loved it. He said it made Longhair's defeat even more humiliating, getting outsmarted by children. The scene was shot over 4 days, each setup more dangerous than the last. Stuntmen took real falls. Explosions went off closer than anyone was comfortable with. One pyrotechnic misfired and nearly set a building on fire. But the chaos worked. The final shootout became one of the most intense, unconventional climaxes in Western history. Not because it was big, but because it was brutal, scrappy, and earned. The boys didn't ride in like heroes. They fought like survivors. Colleen Dewhurst had 1 week to shoot. She played the madam of a frontier brothel, a brief but memorable role. Dewhurst was a stage legend, a powerhouse performer known for her intensity. But she was also in the middle of a Broadway run when the Cowboys called. She couldn't leave for long, so Rydell compressed her entire arc into 6 days of shooting. No rehearsal time, no gradual build, just show up and deliver. Dewhurst arrived on set like a hurricane. She didn't ask for direction. She didn't need it. She knew exactly who this woman was, tough, worn down by the frontier, but still holding on to a shred of dignity. Her scenes with John Wayne crackled with tension and unspoken history. There was a moment, not in the script, where she reaches out and touches Wayne's face. It was pure instinct. Wayne didn't flinch. He stayed in the moment, and Rydell kept it in the film. After her last scene wrapped, Dewhurst packed her bags and flew back to New York that night. She was gone before most of the crew even realized it. But her presence lingered. That week of shooting produced some of the film's most human moments. Proof that sometimes the best performances come from actors who don't have time to overthink. They just show up, trust their instincts, and leave something unforgettable behind.
This is Belfouche. In between is 400 miles of the meanest country in the West.
The river crossing was real, and it was terrifying. No stunt doubles for the kids, no controlled pool with a fake current, just a wide, fast-moving river in Montana, swollen from spring runoff. The boys had to ride their horses into the water, stay in the saddle as the current pulled at them, and make it to the other side. Rydell insisted on it. He wanted the audience to feel the danger, to see real fear on their faces. Safety divers were positioned downstream, out of frame, ready to jump in if anyone went under. But the boys didn't know that. All they knew was the water was freezing, the current was strong, and their horses were scared. The first take, one horse panicked mid-river and tried to turn back. The boy held on barely as the animal thrashed and nearly threw him. Another kid's horse lost its footing on the rocky riverbed and went under for a moment, rider and all. Both resurfaced, sputtering, terrified. Rydell called cut, asked if they were okay, and then asked if they could do it again. They did. 3 more takes, each one as dangerous as the last. When it was over, the boys were shaking, half from the cold, half from adrenaline. But they'd done it, and watching the scene now, you can feel it. That's not movie fear, that's real fear, and it makes every second unforgettable. John Wayne hated the script's original ending. After Anderson's death, the screenplay had the boys riding off into the sunset. Mission complete, lessons learned. Neat, tidy, too easy. Wayne thought it was garbage. He told Rydell, "If I'm going to die in this movie, it has to mean something. These kids can't just ride away like nothing happened." So, they rewrote it together. The new ending was quieter, heavier. The boys bury Anderson, stand over his grave, and realize they've lost more than a trail boss. They've lost their childhood. There's no triumphant music, no heroic speech, just silence, wind, and the weight of what they've been through. Rydell shot it at dawn, golden light breaking over the horizon, the boys backlit and almost silhouetted. It was beautiful and devastating. When the studio saw it, they panicked. They said audiences would leave depressed, that Westerns were supposed to be uplifting. Wayne didn't care. He said, "Life isn't uplifting, and these boys just learned that the hard way." The ending stayed, and it became one of the most powerful closings in any Western, a moment that lingers long after the credits roll. Because sometimes the hardest lesson is that winning doesn't mean everything's okay. Sometimes it just means you survived. A. Martinez was only 17 when he was cast as Cimarron, the half-Native American boy caught between 2 worlds. He had limited acting experience, but he had the look, the intensity, and the ability to ride like he was born in the saddle. Rydell saw something in him, a quiet anger simmering just below the surface, perfect for Cimarron's character arc. But Martinez struggled with one scene in particular. After Anderson's death, Cimarron has to deliver a speech about revenge, about what it means to become a killer. The words felt too big, too heavy. Martinez kept stumbling over the lines, losing the emotion. Rydell pulled him aside, asked what was wrong. Martinez admitted he didn't understand the character's rage. He'd never felt that kind of anger. So Wayne stepped in. He sat with Martinez for over an hour, talking about loss, about helplessness, about the moment you realize words aren't enough and violence becomes the only language left. Wayne didn't tell him how to act. He just told him to remember a time he felt powerless. And when Martinez stepped back in front of the camera, something had changed. His eyes were different. His voice was different. He delivered the speech in one take, and when Rydell called cut, no one spoke for a long moment. Martinez had found it, and Wayne just nodded, walked away. Because the Duke knew. Sometimes you don't teach someone to act. You just help them remember what it feels like to hurt. The production ran out of money. Halfway through shooting, Warner Brothers called Rydell and told him they were over budget. Way over. They'd underestimated the cost of location shooting, the size of the cattle operation, the complexity of the action sequences. The studio wanted to shut it down, finish the film on a soundstage with tight shots and limited setups. Rydell refused. He argued that cutting corners now would ruin everything they'd already captured, the authenticity, the scale, the emotion. It all came from shooting in real locations with real conditions. But the studio wouldn't budge, so John Wayne made a call. He agreed to defer part of his salary, to be paid later if the film made money. It was a massive risk. Wayne was already battling health issues, already thinking about his legacy. But he believed in the film. He believed in what they were building. With Wayne's sacrifice, production continued. They cut where they could, smaller crew, fewer takes, tighter schedules, but they didn't compromise the vision. And when the Cowboys finally hit theaters, it made back its budget and then some. Wayne eventually got paid, but more importantly, he'd saved a film he knew mattered, because sometimes the biggest gamble isn't taking a risk, it's believing something is worth saving. The film's most iconic line wasn't in the script. During Anderson's speech to the boys about what it takes to be a man, Wayne was supposed to deliver a written monologue about toughness and responsibility. But when the cameras rolled, Wayne went off book. He started talking from the heart, from his own life, from his own fears about time running out. He said, "It's not how you're buried, it's how you're remembered." Simple, direct, devastating. Rydell didn't stop him. The crew didn't move. Even the boys stood frozen, listening to John Wayne, not the character, but the man, delivering what felt like a personal message. When Wayne finished, there was silence. Then someone started the cameras rolling again for coverage, and Wayne delivered the same speech, word for word, with the same emotion. That's when Rydell knew. This wasn't just a performance. This was Wayne grappling with his own mortality, using the film to say something he couldn't say anywhere else. That line became the emotional center of the movie. It showed up on posters, in trailers, in reviews, and decades later, it's still quoted, still remembered. Because it wasn't written by a screenwriter, it was lived by a legend who knew his time was running out. The film was rated GP, the precursor to PG, but it sparked a national debate about violence in family films. Parents took their kids expecting a typical John Wayne Western, something safe and heroic. Instead, they watched the Duke get shot in the back, watched children forced to kill, watched a level of brutality most Westerns avoided. Letters poured into Warner Brothers. Some praised the film's honesty. Others called it irresponsible, traumatizing. One parent wrote that their 10-year-old had nightmares for weeks after seeing Wayne die. The studio panicked, considered pulling ads, recutting the film for a softer release. But Rydell and Wayne stood firm. They argued that shielding children from consequences was worse than showing them the truth. The West wasn't noble, war wasn't clean, and heroes didn't always win. The controversy only made people more curious. The Cowboys became a cultural touchstone, a film parents debated, teachers referenced, critics analyzed. It wasn't just entertainment. It was a conversation starter about violence, morality, and what stories we tell our children. And while some families walked out angry, others walked out talking about death, about growing up, about the cost of survival. The film didn't give easy answers, and that's exactly why it mattered.
My name's Homer Williams, Mr. Anderson.
John Wayne knew this might be his last ride. By 1972, he'd survived lung cancer, lost part of a lung, fought through pneumonia. His health was declining, and everyone on set could see it. He moved slower, he tired faster. Some days, he needed oxygen between takes, but he never complained. He showed up every morning, ready to work, determined to finish what he started. The younger actors didn't know how sick he was. Wayne hid it well, but Rydell knew. He'd watch Wayne disappear into his trailer during breaks, hear him coughing, see the exhaustion in his eyes. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult scene, Rydell found Wayne sitting alone, staring at the mountains. Rydell sat down beside him, didn't say anything. Finally, Wayne spoke. He said, "This is a good one. I'm proud of this one." He didn't explain what he meant. He didn't have to. Rydell understood. Wayne knew his time was limited, and if this was going to be his final Western, he wanted it to matter. He wanted to break his own rules, challenge his image, show something real. The Cowboys wasn't John Wayne riding into the sunset one last time. It was John Wayne staring mortality in the face and refusing to blink. And that courage, that honesty, it's in every frame. After the film wrapped, John Wayne gave each of the boys a personal gift. Not publicity stunt items, not studio swag. Real, personal gifts chosen specifically for each kid. Some got engraved belt buckles. Others received handwritten letters. A few got photographs signed, with private messages about their futures. Wayne didn't have to do it. No one expected it. But he'd spent months with these boys, teaching them, watching them grow, seeing them push through pain and fear. And he wanted them to remember, not the movie, not the character, but the experience, the lessons, the man who believed in them. One of the boys later said that gift meant more to him than any paycheck, any screen credit, any memory from the shoot, because John Wayne, the biggest movie star in the world, took the time to see him, not as an actor, as a person. And decades later, those boys, now old men themselves, still have those gifts, still remember that moment, still carry the weight of what it meant to ride alongside a legend who knew he was running out of time, but chose to spend it making sure a group of kids knew they mattered. That's not Hollywood, that's humanity. And it's the kind of thing that never makes it into the credits, but stays with you forever. The Cowboys didn't just tell a story. It broke John Wayne, challenged audiences, and forced everyone to confront what happens when heroes fall and children have to rise. It was brutal, honest, and unforgettable. Remember, it's not how you're buried, it's how you're remembered.